Hello and welcome to the Health and Wellness Show on the SOT Radio Network. I am your host, Doug. With me today is Gabby.
Hello.
And we have a very special interview today. Certainly any readers of SOT will be familiar with Jordan Peterson. It seems like pretty much every 10th article on SOT these days is about Jordan Peterson. Today we have Jordan Peterson's daughter, Mikhaila Peterson, with us. And she's going to be talking to us about things that she has done with the diet to take care of many issues that she's had. So welcome, Mikhaila.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. That's great. And listeners can probably hear Mikhaila's daughter, Scarlett, in the background, who will also be joining us today. So, yeah, maybe to start off, you can maybe just kind of give us some of your story. It's a pretty amazing story. I know you've been troubled by a lot of issues, health issues, since you were very young. So maybe you can just kind of fill us in on a bit of the history there.
Okay. Yeah, it's been a rough go for a while. I started exhibiting symptoms of like a rheumatoid arthritis when I was 2. From when I was walking around. So Dad would put me on his shoulders, and it was just little things. So he'd put me on his shoulders, and when he put me back down, I'd cry and it'd sit down. And looking back on it, it wasn't, he just stopped putting me on his shoulders. That was that was how to solve that problem. But it turned out it was like a hip pain. So I was diagnosed with arthritis when I was 7. And at the same time, we had moved cities from Boston to Toronto, and I started getting tired and cranky, I guess, for a kid. And it turns out that I'd also inherited this, we seem to have some sort of familial, horrible depression that's just been passed down. So that kind of hit around the same time as I was diagnosed with arthritis. So the arthritis was bad enough that, I was put on immune suppressants. And by the age of 17, I ended up with a hip and ankle replacement. So, yeah, my 17th year was not a good year. And let's see, what else? What other health problems have I experienced? When I was 14, I started getting tired. So I started sleeping more and more, and I was just exhausted all the time. And at first I thought it was, teenagers sleep in, but it didn't go away. It just got worse. And by the time I was 19 or 20, I was just sleeping whenever I could. So it ended up being 17-ish hours a day. It was a lot of sleep. Wow. So I was missing out. And even when I was awake, I was exhausted. Then when I was 19, 20-ish, I started getting rashes and skin problems, and I just got worse, right? I moved to Montreal to go to university, and that year I ended up gaining. So I was quite thin after having a hip and ankle replacement because of the surgeries. I moved to Montreal, and I ended up gaining. Let's see, I went from 118, which was pretty skinny for me, to 148 in a year and a half.
Wow.
Yeah,
wow.
When I guess that was 20 to 21.
Wow.
And I was like, well, okay, I'll go to the gym more. So I started going to the gym, but it wasn't working. I was exhausted. My mood was just the worst. My mood just got worse and worse and worse. So I'd been taking antidepressants since I was 12, and my dad's got some flack online for being like, oh, how dare you medicate a child? But I was so unhappy.
Yeah.
And antidepressants helped me so much. But by the time I was, 21, or they weren't doing enough, I tried switching different types, and it wasn't working. So by the time I was 22, I was in rough shape. I was very unhappy. The arthritis was relatively well managed. Well, no, not exactly, but relatively well managed with the immune suppressants, and Tylenol 3, but I was in rough shape when I was 22.
Yeah.
So that's when I started looking into. So when I was 22, I ended up well, I had a rough breakup, but it was probably rough because my mood was so terrible and I was in such rough shape. So I ended up moving back to Toronto, and then my skin issues started getting worse. And I was like, okay, I have arthritis. I'm miserably depressed. I'm exhausted all the time. And now I actually have to deal with like my skin being a problem. Like I can't, that's too many things. So I also started at that point, I was on a like plethora of medication. I started taking Adderall, which, for chronic fatigue, which was great for chronic fatigue, but just horrible for like living. But, I started doing research, and I researched for like 8 months, and I finally found, cause I had no idea where to start. I finally found, this rash you can get from gluten. And online, and I was like, oh my God, that's my rash. Like I've been going to dermatologists, and they've been saying pretty much like, stop doing this to yourself kind of thing, or stop being itchy. I don't know. Anyway.
Like telling you to just by will to get rid of it?
Oh, the amount of times I've been told by doctors that it's in my head, even though I've had like joint replacements, it's shocking. And I've talked to people who are like chronically ill, and they all get it. It's all, oh, well, it sounds like this is caused by your anxiety. It's like, but anyway, I found this picture of this rash, and so I cut out gluten immediately, and it was associated with celiac disease. And I thought, oh, well, people with celiac disease can get really sick and can have autoimmune disorders other than celiac disease. So maybe that's my problem. Like maybe the arthritis was a celiac disease problem. So I cut out gluten, and it helped a little bit, but not enough to make a difference. But by that time I had started to lose weight a little bit. It turns out the reason I had gained weight so much is because I had moved to university and survived off of pierogies and noodles.
I think they call it the freshman 15.
Oh yeah, it was not 15 for me, but yeah, that's what happened. So, anyways, I cut out gluten, and that helped marginally. And then my mom, who had always been bringing me to naturopaths, and they hadn't worked, like no alternative medicine had done anything. We went to a naturopath again, mostly to make her happy. And they said, do an elimination diet. And they gave me this sheet of paper with the foods I could eat. And I looked at it and I thought, this doesn't make any sense. Like I can't eat oranges, but I can eat lemons. I didn't understand some things. So I decided, okay, well, I'll really give it a go, because if gluten is a problem, like maybe something else is a problem. So I cut out some foods, and then nothing seemed to change. So I made myself banana and almond, like gluten-free muffins, and I ate a whole bunch of those. And the next day my arthritis was so bad that I couldn't walk. It was a couple of days later, it hit my knees, and I was like, this doesn't happen. Like, wow. So then I really cut down. So I was eating like carrots, some green vegetables, like, spinach, kale, Swiss chard, chicken and beef. And I did that for a month, and my skin got better. So like all my skin problems went away, and my arthritis cleared up.
Wow. And
I was like, oh, this is crazy, because, the other thing I forgot to mention, when I realized that gluten might have been an issue, in order to test to see if my arthritis would go away, I stopped taking my medication. Otherwise, I didn't think I would know if the arthritis had gone away. Right. Anyway, so my arthritis went away, and it went away fast. Like a month after having it for like 20 years isn't long.
That's amazing.
So then I, continued. I tried to reintroduce some things, and I was still taking antidepressants at this point, but I tried to reintroduce some things. I tried to reintroduce cheese, and it just went horribly.
Yeah.
I tried to reintroduce, this was before I really knew a lot about diet. So I tried reintroducing Sour Patch candy. So I was like, there's no gluten, there's no soy. Like, how bad can it be? Obviously that didn't go well. Almonds didn't go well. Anyway, by December, after just like tinkering around, I mean, I was strict other than the Sour Patch candy. My depression went away. So I started taking less and less antidepressants, and I had tried doing this before, from side effects, and it had never gone well. But this was November, 2014. And I cut them down slowly, and I just felt better and better. And normally people who are depressed some people anyway, tend to get more depressed around Christmas when light goes away. So November isn't generally a good time to taper down. Anyway, I felt I'd never experienced like that kind of, not being depressed before. So I told Dad, and I was like, this is, because Dad has the same depression I have. And I said, this isn't a fluke. Like, this has never gone away. What's going on? You have to try this diet. And he was, typical skeptical. Yeah. Also, I never thought the diet would do anything for the depression. I just thought I was stuck with that. I thought maybe arthritis, but not depression. Anyway, and then in December, I was still wary. I was like, maybe, it wouldn't have just gone away, but maybe it just went away for some reason. I reintroduced soy because that was one of my favorite foods. And I went into one of the worst depressive periods, like the next day that I had been in ever. And it wasn't just a, psychological response. Like, I made my own miso soup. And I had bought gluten-free everything. So it was just reintroducing soy. It was an excellent soup, but it really upset my digestion about half an hour after. And then about 4 hours later, my whole body got itchy. Yeah. And then the next morning, the depression came back, and it just came back like the worst that I've had it. I mean, compounded by the fact I wasn't taking antidepressants, so that didn't help, but it was worse than that. And it lasted for 3.5 weeks. Oh. Wow. And then it went away, and I was like, okay, that was weird. So I kept, for the next year, I kept trying to reintroduce foods, and I didn't really know what I was doing for a long time. So I tried reintroducing whey protein powder, which is that went terribly, and I had the same deep depression, and then kind of 3 weeks later it goes away, and it came with other problems, like my arthritis would flare, I would get itchy, my gums would bleed, it's a whole bunch of it seems like some sort of reaction. So meanwhile, Dad is on this diet, and I didn't know when I had put him on it that it makes when the depressive episodes come back that they become worse. I didn't know that. Anyway, so he had just a miserable time in that year, but he lost weight like crazy. He was 215 or 218 when he started that Christmas. And he went down to 180 in the first year. Wow. Yeah. And it didn't help he wasn't doing it as carefully as I was. So for the first, 3 or 4 months, he was still drinking Diet Coke, but he was doing 99%, right? And so normally if you do, he wasn't eating gluten, he wasn't eating soy, he wasn't eating any sugar. He just cut out everything, but he was eating enough of something wrong that it wasn't helping his mood. Right. So he was losing weight. His physical symptoms were going away. So he had a bit of psoriasis, minor psoriasis. That cleared up. He had gum problems, which he actually mentioned to me the other day that those are gone. So he had receding gums, and they bleed, and he used a water pick all the time just to keep everything healthy. They were sore. That stopped. Oh, he had GERDs. So gastric, yeah. And that went away. So he used to cough a lot, and that went away. So his physical symptoms went away, but it didn't help his mental health until. So what happened? It took a long time, and it was rough for the first year. But then I guess a year and a half later. So that brings us to, he didn't really start feeling better until this year when I I told him how, you mess up a little bit and you're screwed for a month. Yeah. And so now he's off of antidepressants as well. So, and he had been on them for, a solid 15 years and a high dose. He's off of them and he doesn't nap anymore. Like he has to have a 2-hour nap after work. And I used to as well after school. The napping is gone. It is difficult to keep the mood as high as we would like to keep it. But compared to being depressed all the time, it's just changed our lives. And we never thought that it could be food. You're always kind of insulted when someone says, oh, you're depressed. Well, eat better and exercise.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, this is something I'm doing wrong. Like, thanks. So I always had that kind of association with people who were like, well, why don't you look at your diet? But it turns out that the diet factor or whatever is going on is so complicated that it wasn't just, cut down on calories or, stop eating potato chips. It was,
right.
It was,
It was radical change of diet.
Yeah. And we don't eat out anymore. Well, it's changed. A lot has changed, but for the better. I mean, I can think. Like I did a couple of TVO, so TV Ontario, that's in Canada, which is a local TV network. I did a couple of episodes on that with Dad when I was one before the diet and one when I was just getting started. And the difference between me when I wasn't on the diet and when I was just getting started is drastic. And then the difference between when I was just getting started and now is drastic. Like I just look way healthier than I did when I was 20.
Wow.
And I'm older. Yeah. But it's been a whirlwind.
Yeah, I've seen those TVO clips, and the difference is huge. Like it's like looking at two different people, basically.
Yeah, it's scary. It's scary.
Yeah.
And when you reintroduce something, for example, the miso soup, the soy soup, and it will like trigger depression like for 3 weeks, did you reintroduce it? It was just one single soup, or you will try more?
Okay. Well now. Now I just try really tiny bits of things because now I know. But then like that day, which also explains why it was probably the worst depression I had experienced. I had soy in every form. I had miso soup with tofu and I had a bowl of edamame beans. So because I hadn't eaten soy in like 3 months and I used to go out for Japanese food all the time. So I was like, I'll just eat all the soy.
Yeah.
Because just in case something bad happens, it'll be like a good way to go out. But I don't do that. I don't do that anymore.
Yeah, it's funny because the conventional advice on this kind of stuff is like when you're reintroducing a food, you want to get a fairly good quantity of it because, to make sure that you can recognize that you've actually had some kind of reaction. But I think in somebody like, especially in your situation where the symptoms are so extreme, that's really bad advice. It kind of seems like you want to do just a little bit to kind of test things and see how it goes.
Yeah. Yeah. And I didn't know that at the beginning, obviously.
Yeah.
But I found that out after like, a year and a half of pain and suffering. But, it's been, I don't know, it's been very shocking. We tried to look at food when I was little. Like my mom, I had a particularly bad arthritic flare when I was in grade 2 and my like big toe swelled up and my mom was like, what is going on? And we were staying with some of my dad's friends and they said, well, did you introduce anything into her diet? And I'd been eating like cratefuls of clementines. So it turns out, anyway, we went to the doctor. Mom cut those out of my diet right away. And then my toe got better. And by the time we got to the doctor, they were like, oh, well, first of all, it can't be food. And second of all, there's nothing wrong with the toe anymore. But, so I knew kind of like I avoided oranges. I didn't drink orange juice because it used to give me a flare. So I did avoid oranges, but for some reason I didn't look into other foods. I don't know why exactly. It's complicated when you're sick and it seems unbelievable. Yeah.
I think that's just the thing. It's like, the conventional perspective on these things is that food has absolutely nothing to do with these kinds of things that you experience. And I think it is a big, like, it's a leap for people to kind of make that connection, especially when like doctors are telling you all the time, no, it's not food. It's not food.
Oh yeah. My relationship with doctors since I found out it was food has not been good. Like I mean, I lost like my hip replacements, just for anybody listening, they're not so bad. Like they really improved my life, but ankle replacements, that gives me trouble like every day. They're not set up very well. So yeah, I don't have I mean, I guess the change in diet was so weird and random that it's understandable that the medical community doesn't look at food. Kind of, I don't know how I feel about that.
Yeah.
I've tried to mention it to my rheumatologist and said, I think, I don't know, sugar is bothering me or something like that. And he just can't. It's like he's been studying arthritis for so long that he can't hear that.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, and it's sad because like a lot of people with autoimmune disorders and things, they've got a whole plethora of other symptoms. It's not just joint pain. It's, fatigue, weight gain, skin problems, like something's going on.
Yeah.
And instead they're just put on immune suppressants, which are not fun to be on.
No.
And your rheumatologist will not even recognize your improvement. You're not.
Oh yeah. But he thinks I've just gone into remission. And the thing is, like, I mean, I have flare-ups. If I introduce something wrong, I have flare-ups, but I don't go back. I can't make an appointment with him fast enough to go back and I'm not willing to. Like we did discuss last time, he was like, "Oh, I'd like to see one of those reactions," but it's like a month, and it doesn't just come with arthritis. It comes with the mood. If the mood wasn't a problem, then I might be able to, test myself out for him. But the mood is too much.
Yeah, I can imagine. You don't want to put yourself through that torture just to prove your point.
Yeah, no. Although, well, I don't know. We'll see how future Mikhaila feels, because it is sad when I go and see, well, there's so many other people that need help.
Yeah.
And so there's so little risk of just trying to look at diet.
Yeah.
So you haven't found any conventional like mainstream doctor that will be open-minded to the approach that you took?
I found like there are online people, generally who have been sick themselves, doctors that do look at food. They look at like the paleo diet or the keto diet. So there are doctors online for that, but I haven't been able to go to one. And most functional doctors who look at diet, at least in Toronto, are booked solid, and they're not taking any new patients, which is interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, that is interesting. Yeah. Well, it's really one of the things I actually think that, like, because you've been telling your story on your blog, which for our listeners is just MikhailaPeterson.com. And one of the things that I found really, really valuable about your blog is that you kind of really are kind of documenting step by step what the process is, how you kind of eliminate the foods. You even give kind of a list of the foods that are kind of the safe foods, and you document like how you're going through it and how you're reintroducing and what's causing you problems and what isn't. And you're talking about what your dad's going through. You're talking about what your husband is going through. So I think that you're actually doing a really good service to people out there, because when you talk about an elimination diet, it's like people get a list and then it's kind of like you're on your own. And I think that it's very valuable to be able to see the ups and downs, what's involved, how much work it actually is.
Yeah. I'd like to invest more time in it. I started working for Dad because he's been overwhelmed, and man, that's a lot of work. So I slipped and fractured my wrist. So typing has been a pain. But I'm trying to update that as much as possible. But also I think a lot of the people, well, I guess it's different because Dad can bring a lot of new people to the site that have problems. But initially, most of the people who went to the site already had figured out diet was causing some problems for them. So they were having an easier time. Like, I don't even know if I would have Googled, diet and depression or diet and arthritis before I had gone through like the steps that I went through. I don't think that was on my radar at all.
Okay. So I think you were going to ask a question, Gabby. So why don't you go ahead?
Yeah, like
Were there any surprises in terms of healthy foods that in the end we're not, we're not able to tolerate? You will not even suspect even remotely?
Oh yeah, definitely. Well, when I first started, I also didn't know what qualified as a healthy food really. Like I thought I was always eating cheese as a kid because it was full of protein. And I used to get, like angry when I didn't eat. So I'd be like, oh, have a piece of cheese or have a glass of milk or something. So I thought that qualified as healthy food. So, I guess, so I really didn't know where to start. What surprised me? Yeah. I don't know if you guys have heard of them, but there are these things called food sensitivity tests, which, I had done as a kid, and pretty much everything had shown up as a sensitivity. So we just threw it away.
Oh.
So there were some, it turns out that those tests, at least for our depression, have really been useful. So there were some random foods on that I'll have really terrible reactions to that don't make any sense. Kelp noodles, which I literally bought at a health food organic store, and I had a terrible reaction to those, and they don't taste good. So it wasn't worth it. What else? A lot of fruit, because I thought it turns out, at least for me, that sugar isn't good in really any form. So carbier vegetables or fruit. So there were a lot of fruit that I thought were healthy that I can't tolerate. What was the weirdest one? Well, lots of people, I don't know if they still do it, but they say that soy is a healthy form of protein, and man, that was the worst.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, everything's been a surprise. Even the fact that food has anything to do with it was a surprise.
Yeah. I mean, I think, years and years of programming by the food pyramid and government recommendations have kind of really twisted what people perceive to be a healthy food. It's like they say, make sure you get your 5 servings of fruits and vegetables, and drink your milk and eat your cheese and all that kind of stuff. And it's really like, it's the complete opposite, really, of what people should be doing.
Yeah, it's terrible. It's really awful that people are being told that. I got a lot of flack from people during the pregnancy for not drinking milk. I had one person tell me I wouldn't produce breast milk if I didn't drink milk.
Oh my God.
And I was like, that makes no sense. But yeah, people aren't happy when you take away their foods. And I can remember, people telling me to look at diet, and that made me mad. But it was also in a condescending way, kind of like you're doing something wrong.
Yeah. It's funny because on your blog, I read in one of your posts, you said you were talking about that, that if you're doing this diet, you might actually get some hostility from people. And you said people are very attached to their foods, even if someone else is changing their diet, which I know I've experienced as well, which is, it's really, it's so bizarre.
Yeah, it's really strange. It's like, I'm not eating this anymore, and then they get mad at you.
Yeah. And it's kind of like, I find that this is really, this diet is really helping me. And they're kind of like, well, it's not the diet. It's obviously something else. And it's like.
Yeah. I mean, fortunately or unfortunately, I was considered sick enough that when I say something like, oh, my arthritis is gone, people are pretty much like, oh, wow.
Yeah.
But like my husband, who he suffered from, he would have been considered like a healthy person, but he had some serious mood problems and a little bit of weight, but not really, pretty healthy. He got a lot of flack for cutting things out because it was like, oh, well, you're just doing what Mikhaila's doing. But then it affects him too. And he was an all around healthy person. So yeah. And dad's symptoms, like when he ends up introducing a food that goes badly, they're so bad that no one's been giving him flack too, especially because he didn't want to cut out any foods and he used to eat out all the time. So it wasn't like, he also doesn't like talking about it. He's talking about it more now though. I think he mentioned something on Joe Rogan, which was nice. So he is talking about it. It helps that it has improved his mood now. Like for the first year and a half, his physical symptoms went away, but his mood didn't. And so that wasn't very encouraging.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is kind of funny the reaction that people get. It's almost like you're threatening their diet. You know what I mean? It's like even though you're only doing it for yourself and you're not telling them to do it, it's kind of like they feel like that well, you're suggesting that I'm doing something wrong. And it's like, well, no, I'm just helping myself.
Yeah. At the beginning, I mean, now I am kind of vocal about people who should, like, I've done quite a bit of looking into gluten and grains for people's health. And that seems like the more I read about that, and there are papers out and like actual evidence that stuff like that isn't good for people. So I've started to become more annoying about telling people about diet. At the beginning, I was like, you do you, but this is working for me.
Yeah.
But now I think I've become slightly more annoying. But I also feel bad if I don't say anything too. And then I'm like, well, what if I don't say anything and something bad happens?
Yeah. And has anybody been responsive to it? Like have any of your friends or like acquaintances kind of taken it up? Oh.
Yeah. My aunt and uncle just started doing mostly meat and vegetables. Well, my parents obviously, one of my good friends, she's basically on the same diet. My husband, and then my best friend's cut out dairy and she tried cutting out gluten. So people have been, I mean, I guess seeing the change in me has been really useful because I was just I was barely holding on there for a while. Yeah. And now I'm awake and everything. I mean, probably me being awake has been the biggest change for people. Yeah. So I have, people are open, especially if they see what a positive difference it's made for you.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like being the example, basically. It's like, if they don't want to listen to what you have to say, it's like just by being the example, a lot of times it's enough to convince people.
Yeah.
The difficult part is when friends, our family and friends are against it. Like, no, we don't do that. It's too restrictive.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Well, there's a definite portion of people who have not made things easy about that, shockingly. But mostly it's been people who actually knew me. It's been positive.
That's good. Yeah. One other thing you talked about on your blog, actually, that I thought was important because it's something that kind of we've noticed, all the different people kind of on our forum who have been experimenting with this diet and stuff like that is food withdrawal. Because it seems to be like something that a lot of people don't really recognize, and it almost doesn't make sense. Like, why is cutting out cheese suddenly making me like almost have these drug withdrawal symptoms? Did you find that you had that?
So I think if I hadn't been on so much medication when I had started, I would have noticed that more. Like I was still taking Adderall, Tylenol-free, and birth control, and there were some other ones, something to sleep and antidepressants when I started on the diet. So the Adderall actually just kills your appetite. So a lot of the things people experience when they cut out of food is severe cravings. So I didn't actually experience that because I had no appetite. So that was, that was good, I guess. But when my fatigue went away and I stopped taking Adderall and I started getting the cravings, some of those symptoms are intense. Like, when at the very, much later, I cut out fruit, and I actually, I had cut out gluten and I didn't reintroduce it back in. After I cut out dairy for good, I didn't reintroduce it back in. But when I cut out fruit, the sugar cravings were so bad that like about 2 weeks in, I was like, you know what? It's probably not. This probably isn't the problem. And I had a whole bunch and it was the problem. But but that was the first time I'd actually caved. So those cravings were crazy. I was just thinking about sugar all the time. And that was just fruit sugar. And then I guess the other one, dairy. Dairy that was a big craving. And that's popped up after I tried whey protein powder. I had dairy cravings for like about a month after that. And those are intense. It is surprising because some foods you can cut out for a while and you don't crave them. And some foods, dairy and sugar, you really do.
Yeah.
And I guess you can tell by the foods that I tried to reintroduce first. When I first went on the diet, I tried cheese, I tried Sour Patch Candy, and I tried soy. So those were the ones that I was thinking about the most.
Right.
I didn't recognize that as cravings exactly. Well, I recognized the soy as cravings, but I didn't realize that was maybe not a good sign.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Good. I mean, the sugar thing is interesting too. I mean, the dairy thing is interesting because there are kind of like the same with gluten. They have these kind of opiate kind of properties, and people kind of don't realize that they're sort of medicating themselves with these foods a lot. Mm-hmm. But the sugar one is really interesting too, because I think that, and you've talked about this on your blog as well, that it's the kind of the connection to the whole candida thing.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I've got a whole bunch of theories about what's going on, because I'm sure there's some underlying cause, especially for people who are really affected by food. So yeah, one of the theories I had was, well, maybe this is a candida problem. But which, and it does, it makes sense a lot of the ways. Like, you take antibiotics, you wipe out your microbiome, and then you get a yeast overgrowth. That is what happens. And yeast feeds off of sugar, and then it can get you to crave sugar. So, and that can give you a whole bunch of autoimmune symptoms. It's just mainstream medicine. It's hard to test for these things, which is really frustrating. And the problem, and then part of the problem is, like, let's say you do have a candida problem. It is like rather difficult to solve. You can like stop feeding it everything, but it's pretty good at just like lying dormant for a really long time. So, and then there's no way to actually test if that theory is right. Yeah. So it's hard. I mean, that is a good theory for the sugar, but then you can have problems with your microbiome too that are getting you to crave sugar. Like, I don't know. Who knows? Yeah. But I know what not to eat to avoid whatever the problem is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And there are many common themes of food intolerances within the family.
Yeah. Well, my brother seems to have, like, I still think he shouldn't be eating gluten, like, period. But he's dodged this for the most part for whatever reason. So thank God. Yeah. Dad seems to have the worst, well, mood-wise and now physical symptoms if he gets hit again. And then Mom is the one with the celiac problem. But so she was always, well, she was actually the one who was into food for the longest, and we were always like, "Oh, Mom, yeah, doing your health kick."
I'm the one in my family who's like that, actually.
Oh yeah,
yeah, yeah.
Well, it's good to have somebody thinking about it. It's just hard. Like, it's hard to imagine how much of an impact food can have. Yeah. It's hard to fathom that. And if I had periods of time in my life where I wasn't sick, then maybe I could have been like, oh, well, I want to feel like that again. But because I got sick at such a young age, I just thought that's what living was like. Mm-hmm. So I didn't have any baseline of like, what does feeling better mean? So then when I actually like got rid of some things and felt better, I was like, oh, I can feel like this all the time. Like, wow. That's the difference. And so that made it easier to, want to change.
Right.
So I usually tell people, especially the people who are like, what you're doing is bad for your health and you're going to have vitamin deficiencies and all these things. Well, I can get into that later, but I usually tell them like, try it for a month. That's all you need to do. You're not going to become vitamin deficient in a month and like none of your concerns matter for the month of changing your diet. Right. And then decide what you think. Like that's the only way to change your mind, right? Is to see if it has an effect on you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And you've actually gone so far as to be only on meat right now. Is that right?
Yep. So, what happened? So I got pregnant last December, and before that I was in like the best shape I'd ever been in, and 10 out of 10 on mood. Like I was having a great time. I got pregnant and I started having not a great time, which happens during pregnancy, but it's like my depression came back, which also can happen during pregnancy. But I was like, something's wrong. Like, I know that this isn't right. Anyway, I had a hard time getting the depression under control. So I cut out fruit. That helped a lot. But I ended up stopping. I wasn't able to tolerate what I had figured out I could tolerate. Like, I used to be able to eat, apples, pears, sweet potatoes, like carbier things, and they wouldn't give me arthritis. Like, everything was fine. And then I lost that tolerance over the pregnancy. And it turns out, this is my latest theory that I also have no evidence for yet, but it turns out you get microbiome changes during the pregnancy. So that's well documented that your microbiome becomes less diverse. So it's possible I already have an underlying issue there, and then lack of diversity, I stopped being able to tolerate some carby foods because your microbiome helps you digest the carby foods. Right. Well, carby like a sweet potato, not that carby, but kind of carby. So I, had a baby and my mood didn't seem to get better. I was hoping it was hormones or something. My mood didn't seem to get better. And I started getting like twinges, kind of arthritis again. I was like, what's happening? Like, I haven't introduced anything. What's going on? So I Googled, I don't remember, out of frustration one day, I was like allergic to everything. Like, is that a possible thing? And I found this lady with Lyme disease who had been on an all meat diet for 19 years. And that was the only way to control her Lyme. And I was like, okay. So my concern about going on an all meat diet was, am I going to die of a vitamin deficiency? Right. But finding that woman and being like, well, if you can survive for 19 years, she's probably fine. So then I found Sean Baker on Joe Rogan, who is also doing what's called the carnivore diet. And I guess his theory is people should be just eating meat, which I don't think I agree with. I think maybe some people with really messed up microbiomes who are sick can't seem to tolerate things other than meat, but not that everyone should be doing that. But anyway, so I decided to give it a try, and my arthritis went away. And my mood improved. So I feel better again, but it looks like, I don't know, like I'm not entirely sure what to do about this. I've tried probiotics, but I don't tolerate them. Like, it's possible. What I'm hoping is I'll stick to this for a while, and whatever my problem is will heal. Which maybe it'll take 5 years, but maybe that'll heal, and then I can start to put probiotics and reintroducing some other foods. But I mean, for now, this is what I'm doing. That being said, Dad isn't doing this. He doesn't seem to need to do this, and my husband isn't. My husband's been able to introduce, actually, he's not quite as sensitive as Dad and I, thank God. But so I don't think, I don't know. I guess it depends on how damaged you are. I also think sometimes the carnivore diet works for people because they don't know which vegetables are actually the safer vegetables to eat. Right. So they end up cutting out everything and feel better. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And all the environmental triggers for, delayed immune responses, they usually come from the vegetable kingdom. So it will make sense,
Yeah. They're all like, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, like, it's funny because, I mean, the all meat diet or carnivore diet, however you want to say it, is rather, like, it's controversial, right? Because, again, people are kind of brainwashed with this food pyramid type idea that you need to have dairy products, you need to have grains, like all these kinds of things, and that you will suffer from kind of, like, deficiencies in some way if you don't. But, I mean, there's so much historical, precedence for it, like the Inuit in Canada and, like, there's in the Arctic of Russia, there were people, the Maasai, like there's all these groups that were eating nothing but meat and they're fine, and they weren't drinking milk, but they were still able to produce breast milk. It's a miracle. But it just seems like, people are very afraid of this kind of thing. But if you really look at it and have a kind of a rational perspective on it, it seems like it isn't really that controversial. Like people have been doing this for millennia. So
Yeah, it's also not particularly dangerous. Like,
No.
I mean, the standard American diet right now is pretty freaking dangerous.
Yeah.
But doing something like cutting out groups of food for a period of time, like, first of all, if you have a vitamin deficiency, you're gonna know. Like, those are serious. So it's not you're gonna cut out a food and then you're gonna die.
Yeah.
Right, which is a lot of what I've heard. Like, aren't you worried you're going to die? I'm like, I think I'll feel like I'm going to die for quite a while before that happens.
Exactly.
But, so people are scared, but I mean, I find it much scarier. People eating foods that they don't know are really harming them, and you can just see when you go outside, like who's affected by this, or people who are trying to lose weight. That makes me sad. People who are trying to lose weight and they're just working out all the time and trying as hard as they can. And they're exhausted and it's not working. And it's like, you're not doing anything wrong. You're having some reactions to some things you really can't be eating.
Yeah.
And then they're getting blamed for being overweight.
Yeah.
It's like, well, everyone's telling me to eat milk and grain.
Yeah.
What do they expect?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I mean, and the concentration is all on calories and stuff like that. And it's like, it's not the calories. Like, people going down to like 1,000 calories a day to try and lose weight. It's just crazy.
I know. It's horrible.
Yeah.
Like starve yourself and you'll lose weight. And it's like,
yeah.
Oh, yeah, no, it's terrible. And it's really awful that you can't just go to a doctor and they say, you know what, we'll tinker around with your diet for a while. And if that doesn't help, we'll look at medications as well.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the one thing that Gabby and I have both written about actually extensively is the whole fats thing. The whole fact that, fat is considered the enemy. And I mean, it's starting to get, people are starting to realize now, and you're starting to see stuff in the mainstream press about fat not being bad. But people have been so thoroughly brainwashed with that one, the idea that if you have any fat at all, especially, God forbid, animal fats, then you're just going to clog your arteries and your cholesterol is going to shoot up and you're just going to die.
Yeah. I've been told that a lot since the whole meat diet.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Or meat being carcinogenic. Got that
as
well. Oh my
God, that one's ridiculous.
Yeah. I don't know what to say about that. I really don't know what to say about that. It's awful.
Yeah.
And there's a whole background of why, especially North Americans think that vegetable oil is good, and it's all just the vegetable oil companies telling them that. Yeah. Which is just criminal.
Yeah. I totally agree. And it's the same thing with the dairy industry, like the vegetable oil industry, like all these kind of like, industries that have ties to government, so then the government recommends it, and it's just, it really is criminal. I agree.
Yeah, and then that brings up another problem. Like, part of the reason I didn't take, looking into food seriously was because I talked to people and they'd say, oh my God, there's this sugar, dairy, wheat conspiracy.
Yeah.
And I'd be like, oh yeah, you're a crazy person.
Yeah, exactly.
And now I'm one of those crazy people.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's true. You tell people, oh no, the FDA is a totally corrupt institution. It's like, oh, okay, yeah, where's your tinfoil hat?
Yeah, one of those. Yeah, it's sad. But, I mean, hopefully I think it is spreading. I hope it's spreading. But I Google this all the time. So I'm also kind of assuming that my search results just show up for me. So I'm not sure if it's spreading or I'm just getting. Yeah, but I think it might be. At least the gluten-free thing definitely is, because there's gluten-free everything.
Yeah.
So I think it's going to be a while, but it's definitely better than it was 15 years ago.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, somebody who had a gluten sensitivity, which was relatively, unheard of back in the day. I mean, they didn't really have any options. Like it really was kind of much more restrictive than now. But unfortunately also like an industry has grown up around that, and it's become a new kind of thing where if something's labeled as gluten-free, but then you look at the ingredients on it, it's like, well, these are all crap ingredients anyway. It's like, you're not really doing yourself any favors by avoiding the gluten in this situation. If it's got soy or, a bunch of other, harmful grains in it or something like that, it's like, it's really no better.
No, it's better. Like Well, I would say if the least you're going to do, you could do that. At least you're getting rid of the gluten. But it would be better if you just cut out foods that are like that. Like there are a lot of, replace pizza with this kind of like pizza thing. And it's just don't eat pizza.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it's hard, I guess, to cut out those people's favorite foods.
Mm-hmm.
I agree. I think there has been a lot of awareness into the cholesterol myth, gluten-free, Somehow people come to accept that, but I think we're sorely lacking in food sensitivities, like delayed immune responses. Like some people, they don't do well in the paleo diet,
Yeah. Like lots of people can't tolerate. I mean, almonds, that's a really bad reaction for me. And that's considered a health food. Yeah. And I do get flack for suggesting food sensitivity testing because they're like, oh, there's no evidence for that, but there is evidence for that. And man, like in one of my second year textbooks, like immunology textbooks, they had, delayed reactions. So it's called a delayed IgG reaction. And they talked about these reactions, but only in regards to, bacteria or viruses. So they were saying, oh, you can have these things. They take about, 21 days or, 7 days to peak and 21 days to go away-ish. And it's to, bacteria or viruses. And then you say, okay, well, my body's producing the same reaction to foods. And they're like, oh, well, that's protective. Oh, like, what?
Jeez.
Yeah. So hopefully that'll all spread. I mean, thank God for the internet.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And you've talked a lot about the IgG tests, actually, and I do think it's a great thing for people to be doing. A number of people, like on our forums, have tried those out, and one of the things actually you mentioned on your blog is that there seems to be some things that kind of show up for everybody, and one of the big ones that we found was eggs. There was hardly anybody who didn't have eggs on theirs.
I mean, the red for eggs.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't do egg whites. Dad can't do egg yolks or egg whites. Yeah, and eggs are one of the, even people who are on the carnivore diet, a lot of the people still include dairy and eggs. Eggs don't work for a lot of people.
Yeah.
And that's a strange one, but I don't know, what can you say? But yeah, like milk shows up on most people's, eggs and a lot of the grains, especially wheat.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then that kind of says, like, you can take that as, oh, well, if everyone is like that, then maybe it doesn't matter. That's one of the arguments. Or maybe just no people should be eating it.
Yeah.
Maybe that's not a people food.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I was speculating about the eggs, actually, because I know eggs are one of the mediums that they use to grow things in for vaccines. And then to have that kind of go along with the virus or bacteria into the bloodstream, like directly in there, like maybe everybody's kind of getting this kind of immune reaction, like when they're an infant. And then that's kind of why you continue to react to that over time. I don't know if that's true, but it was just something that I was kind of speculating about because there is a history.
That's interesting.
Yeah. And it's kind of just something.
That's interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, like I say, I don't know if it's true, but it kind of makes sense. Like it's an introduction directly into the blood. Like it's not going through the digestive system, and so you're having these foreign proteins introduced at a very young age. So yeah, it actually wouldn't surprise me. It'd be interesting to see if the few people who don't seem to react to eggs, if they were vaccinated in infancy, because it might be related. I
know, it's too bad you can't just do all these studies, because that's actually a really interesting, it's an interesting proposition.
Yeah. So one other thing actually on your blog that you were talking about, you had a post where you were talking about the things when you do introduce something and you have a reaction, there are certain things that you do to kind of mitigate it, to try and kind of deal with it. Maybe you can talk about some of those. Like one in particular that we've done some experimenting with is infrared saunas.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so first, when I realize I'm having a reaction, I generally cry. That's the first. I'm like, oh no, not this again for this long. So but other than that, first step is I get in the sauna. So if I'm really not feeling good, and the main symptom that is just horrible is this feeling of impending doom. and it's just like a cloud that envelops you. And my dad gets it, my husband gets it, and I've read online about people who get it, although it's harder to find, but it's just this horrible doom. And for some reason, getting in the sauna, my parents have a sauna that my mom put into the basement. So getting into that sauna for, half an hour until you kind of really want to get out, or maybe a little bit after you really want to get out, that seems to, unless you're in really bad condition, that seems to get rid of the doom. And so if I'm really not feeling well, I need to do that about twice a day when I'm really not good, because it seems to build up again. So I'm assuming that's, I don't know, something in me that wants to get out, and the sauna helps it get out.
Yeah.
So yeah, infrared sauning, if you're reintroducing a food and it doesn't go well and you feel like death, I figure that increases my mood by about 20%. And
Wow.
Dad feels the same way. So those are great. The other thing I do, because these reactions last for so long, at least for me, when I'm not feeling well, is I'll circle a date on my calendar. So it'll be about 24 days later, and I'll say, I'm going to feel better here. Just wait till then to start freaking out, because I'll be at it'll be 2 weeks after eating not very much of a food. And I'll be like, why am I still arthritic? Or why are, sometimes symptoms crop up after 2 weeks. Like my arthritis seems to get worse towards the end of a reaction. So then I get all paranoid about having accidentally eaten something towards the end of the reaction. So I, can look at my calendar and be like, nope, just stop worrying until that day.
Right.
So I don't know if that's helpful for people, but otherwise I just read way too far into everything. Other than that, I've tried, if I realize I've accidentally gotten poisoned with something, I'll take activated charcoal. That seems to help my skin. So when I get these reactions, it hits my skin again, and my skin seems to enjoy that. So I'm hoping it doesn't seem to help very much with the mood, but it's definitely not hurting. So I'll take activated charcoal as soon as I can. And then I'll do that, every night for 4 or 5 days, just to help flush things out. Let's see. The infrared sauning definitely makes the most difference. And the other interesting thing, and Dad and I both noticed this, is when we're not feeling well, like mood is down or reacting to something, you sweat a lot faster. So it'll be like, if I'm not feeling good, it'll be in there for 6 or 7 minutes and start sweating. And then when I'm feeling good, it'll take 18 minutes. And that, I guess that kind of makes sense, because with some of these reactions I get, I sweat at night, or I'm just hot all the time. So I think it's my body trying to get rid of things. So is there anything else? Infrared sauning. I might have mentioned other things on the blog.
You mentioned 5-HTP for mood.
Oh, yeah. Okay, so 5-HTP, if you're horribly depressed, 5-HTP probably isn't going to do a lot. But now that I have these reactions, and it'll be I get miserably depressed, but it's only from one thing I've eaten, 5-HTP makes quite a bit of difference. And I generally take a pretty high dose, split up throughout the day with food. And that does help me. It helps Dad. My husband takes it. I've heard some people who maybe the reason they get depressed isn't a serotonin problem, so 5-HTP doesn't help, or it makes them angry or something. So people are going to have to figure that out by themselves. But I would just say, figure out how much you need and make sure you take it with food, because if you take enough without food, it can cause some really nasty nausea. But so yeah, I'll generally do, honestly, if I have, this doesn't happen anymore because I'm just eating meat and I don't eat out. So I'm just never going to be poisoned.
Right.
Knock on wood. But, for my husband, he eats out for business meetings, and everything. And well, when I used to do that, if I had a really horrible depressive episode that I knew was going to last for a couple weeks, and I was below what I call a 5, so we rate our mood so that you can monitor it. If I got below a 5 for long enough, I'd go back on my antidepressants. Because it was, like, I knew I would be able to stop, and it was just too horrible.
Right.
To deal with. I generally, like, I haven't done that for quite a while, but I mean, if there are people in really rough mental shape, there's no reason to not be taking the medication until you're out of that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that's true. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm luckily I can avoid it now because I don't enjoy taking antidepressants. But I mean, if the alternative is you're in hell, then there is no alternative. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think, there is a stigma against antidepressants, and, in some cases, I think they probably are overprescribed, but I think, like, in a situation like yours, it definitely makes sense, just to get you out of that mindset.
Yeah. Yeah. It depends how desperate you are, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. It'd be better if doctors just looked at diet, but first. But that's not going to happen for a while.
Yeah.
Especially if this food sensitivity testing doesn't catch on for a while. Although maybe I'm sure eventually it'll happen.
Yeah. Well, I certainly hope so. Yeah.
Yeah, me too.
So, did you have any other questions, Gabby?
Actually, we covered everything I wanted to ask.
Yeah, me too. And we're coming up, we're over an hour right now, so I think maybe this is a good time. Oh, actually, before we leave, this isn't really related to diet, but I did just kind of want to ask you, like, how do you feel about kind of your dad's huge kind of rise recently? Like, how is that affecting you? Is it still kind of like he's the same old dad at home and everything's normal, or is everything crazy?
Everything is crazy.
Yeah.
Since for like about 15 months, he got, weirdly what we thought was like 15 minutes of fame. And then it just expanded. Yeah. And now it's just expanding like crazy. And no, we all don't know how to deal with it. I've been trying to, it's crazy. Like he's gone from just like, I guess, a normal person to, I've had to be like, Dad, you can't give your email out to people anymore. Right? Or like you can't have a cell phone number listed online.
Right.
And it's things, and he's just like, oh, well, then how are people going to get a hold of me? It's like, oh, okay, you're in a different category now. And it's really hard. It's hard to fathom. And I didn't really understand until I started trying to help him out and looking at media requests. And it's constant. His days have been, especially since the book release.
Yeah.
Like there was one day he flew to New York and he had events from 3 a.m. to 1 a.m.
Wow.
So
my God.
We canceled a bunch of those because I was like, you can't handle this. You still have to live.
Sleep.
It's been, like when are you going to sleep and eat? And he can't, it's annoying because he can't just eat on the run, right? This all has to be, like, my mom is always with him to make sure he doesn't, mess up. Otherwise, like, he's out for a month.
Yeah.
So it's complicated. I mean, it's fun and he's having a good time, but like we don't see him as much. And when he's around, there's a lot on his mind.
Yeah.
I think I'm hoping that it's getting a little more organized now and he's not going to be so swamped, but, it's hard to believe.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, especially being in the situation that he's in with the food sensitivities, I guess he's really lucky to have, your mom with him to kind of like watch his back in that sense so he doesn't get poisoned.
Yeah, that's the other thing. Like people who have food sensitivities this badly, like it's a group effort.
Yeah.
Like if he, eats one thing wrong every 20 days, then he's screwed. So yeah, Mom, he's incredibly lucky, and she's very good at looking at ingredients and everything and making sure he's okay and saying, if he does eat out, they talk to the chef, and then she'll, be like, okay, well, what's that? We didn't order that. Or, they put seasoning on your steak. It's ridiculous. It made him really uncomfortable. It made me uncomfortable too in the beginning eating out, because I used to be the type of person who'd be like, oh, you gave me the wrong dish, but I'll just eat it anyway. Don't worry about it.
Yeah.
And now it's like, oh, you put the wrong type of dressing on my salad. I have to send it back. And I'm like, oh, it's still ingrained in me that that's rude, and it's ingrained in him that that's rude. And so luckily my mom is around to have his back. Yeah.
I think it's partly because we're polite Canadians, because I've gone through that as well. It's kind of like, oh man, you sent me the wrong thing. Normally I would just eat it and like suck it up, but like, I have to send this back.
Oh, maybe it is a Canadian thing. My husband, he's born in Russia. He doesn't have any qualms. Like, he'll say, well, it's your job as the waiter to get my order right, and you didn't get my order right, and I'm paying you, so why shouldn't I say something? Yeah. I'm like, okay, well, that's fair enough. But so luckily, he kind of covers for me when I'm out.
Right.
So I'll be like, I don't want to do this. You order for me. And mom will kind of cover for dad.
Right.
Maybe we're just wimpy. I don't know.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, it's very good to hear that you both have a network of support.
Yeah.
We can learn that from the Russians.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, the stuff that your dad is like talking about and stuff, is that something that you're kind of on board with, or is it something that's just like he's still dad and like, that's his thing and, you don't really pay much attention to it, or just out of curiosity?
Let me think. There's a lot that comes up, so I follow some of it. I usually avoid the more negative articles because they make me angry.
Yeah.
There was a lot published at the beginning about things he said that he hadn't actually said, which was concerning because I used to read newspapers all the time or online news and just believe what newspapers said about people, and then hearing stuff like that, it's like, oh, I can't trust news networks anymore. That's cool.
Yeah.
So I guess I think my brother might watch more of like the podcasts and everything than I do. It's strange when I watch it. Yeah, it's been a whirlwind. It's a crazy experience.
Yeah. Great. Okay, well, I guess that is our show for today. So thanks, everybody, for listening. Don't forget to tune into the SOT Radio Network show on Sunday. That's at 12 Eastern Time. And also, yes, I almost forgot. If you want to keep up with Mikhaila online, her blog is at MikhailaPeterson.com. And she also has a Patreon going, so you can support her blog and what she's doing. And that's just patreon.com/Mikhaila Peterson. So thanks very much for joining us today, Mikhaila. Your story is pretty incredible and I think very inspirational.
It's amazing. Thank you, Mikhaila.
Thanks for having me. It was fun.
Okay. Bye, everybody.
Bye.